My eyes snapped open to Betrayal Reborn. 5 years in the past, yet the memory of tomorrow's humiliation burned fresh in my mind. In this second chance at life, I already knew exactly how my sister and fiancé would betray me at my own surprise birthday party. The familiar scent of lilac perfume drifted through the open window of my bedroom. My sister's signature fragrance that once brought comfort, but now only triggered memories of her victorious smile as she stood beside the man who had promised to love only me. I sat up slowly, fingers trembling as they traced the edge of my silk sheets. The smooth fabric slid between my fingertips as reality settled in my bones. I was back. 5 years back, with all my memories intact. Vivian? My sister's voice called from outside my door. Are you awake? Dad wants us all at breakfast in 20. I'll be down soon, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice despite the storm raging in my chest. I stepped into the shower, letting hot water cascade over my skin while my mind raced through the implications. Yesterday, or rather 5 years from now, I'd been a broken woman, betrayed by everyone I loved and pushed out of my family's company. Then I'd gone to sleep wishing for a second chance, and somehow, here I was. The bathroom mirror fogged as I emerged from the shower, wiping condensation away to reveal my 27-year-old face staring back. 5 years younger, before the lines of bitterness had etched themselves around my eyes. Before I learned how disposable I was to the people I trusted most. I dressed deliberately in a white blouse and black pencil skirt, power clothes, and descended the spiral staircase to our family's breakfast room. "Morning, princess." My father's booming voice greeted me as I entered. He sat at the head of the table, the financial section of the newspaper creating a barrier between him and the rest of us. The rustle of paper accompanied each turn of the page, a sound that had been the backdrop to countless family breakfasts. "Good morning, Dad." My voice nearly caught as I looked at him, alive and well, not yet the man who would choose my sister over me when everything fell apart. There she is. My sister Rose jumped up to hug me, her lilac perfume enveloping me in a cloud that made my stomach lurch. As she pulled back, I noticed the diamond earrings dangling from her ears. My earrings, the ones our grandmother had left specifically to me. Just like before, she'd borrowed them without asking. The cold metal of my engagement ring felt like a shackle around my finger as I took my seat at the table. The weight of it seemed heavier this time, now that I knew what it truly represented. Not love, but convenience. A merger of families rather than hearts. "Did you sleep well?" Rose asked, buttering her toast with precise movements. "You were tossing and turning when I checked on you last night?" I nearly froze. She'd been in my room while I slept. The thought sent a chill down my spine. "I had strange dreams," I replied, reaching for the coffee pot to hide the tension in my face. The bitter aroma filled my nostrils as I poured, grounding me in the present. "Nothing important." My father lowered his newspaper slightly. "Make sure you're well rested for the board meeting next week. The Nakamura deal won't close itself." I nodded, a plan already forming. "Actually, I was thinking of calling Marcus today to go over some of the numbers again." My father's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your fiancé can handle the financial side. That's why I brought him into the company." I smiled tightly. "Of course, but I'd like to understand it better myself." Rose glanced up, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "Since when are you interested in the financial details? I thought you were happy handling the creative department." "Just taking more interest in the family business," I said lightly, but I could see the concern flash across her face. Any deviation from my previous behavior would raise suspicions. After breakfast, I retreated to my private study and locked the door. The leather of my office chair creaked as I sat down and reached for my phone. With steady fingers, I dialed a number I'd memorized from my previous life. Marcus wasn't our only accountant. "Richard, it's Vivian Lancaster. I need to meet with you today. It's urgent." 3 hours later, I sat across from Richard Thornfield, the forensic accountant who, in my previous life, had helped me piece together the extent of my family's betrayal. Too late to save anything. The bitter scent of his black coffee mingled with the leather-bound portfolio he'd placed between us. "Miss Lancaster, I'm confused about what you're asking me to look for," he said, his pen tapping against his notepad. The rhythmic sound echoed in the quiet conference room I'd booked downtown. far from any familiar eyes. I need you to verify who has access to all our company accounts, I explained. And I need it to be completely confidential. His eyebrows rose. Does your father know about this? This is my preliminary due diligence, I said smoothly. For when I take over as CEO. Richard nodded slowly, though confusion still lingered in his eyes. And the transfers you're proposing are completely legal, I finished for him. I'm simply moving funds that are already under my control to more secure locations. By the time our meeting concluded, I had set in motion the financial safeguards that would prevent what happened in my previous life. The Lancaster Group had always been legally mine. My father had put it in my name for tax purposes years ago, never imagining I would actually exercise that control. In my first life, I'd been too trusting to check the accounts until it was too late. Not this time. My phone buzzed as I left Richard's office. Marcus's name flashed on the screen, and I felt my heart stutter despite my resolve. The man I'd once loved enough to marry, the man who would announce his engagement to my sister at my surprise birthday party tomorrow night. I answered with forced cheerfulness. Hey, you. Viv, where are you? I stopped by your office, but Janice said you've been out all day. His voice held that charming concern that had once melted my defenses. Now it just sounded calculated. Just running some errands, I said. Did you need something? Just checking your schedule for tomorrow. Are you free around 7? I thought we could have dinner at Maison Bleu. The knot in my stomach tightened. This was exactly how he'd lured me to my surprise party the first time around. I heard a soft giggle in the background. Rose, no doubt, helping him set the trap. Sounds perfect, I replied, injecting warmth into my voice. I can't wait. Great, wear that blue dress I love, he said, then quickly added, I mean, if you want to. No pressure. The blue dress that happened to make me look washed out compared to Rose's vibrant red hair and green eyes. The blue dress he'd later told me had been a bit matronly, once he no longer needed to pretend. Of course, I agreed. See you tomorrow. After hanging up, I leaned against the wall of the elevator descending to the parking garage, allowing myself 10 seconds to breathe through the rage and hurt. The polished metal interior reflected a composed woman in a business suit, not a hint of the turmoil within. 10 seconds only. That was my rule now. Feel it, then move past it. Emotions wouldn't save me this time. Strategy would. The elevator dinged as it reached the parking level, and I straightened. The concrete floor amplified my determined footsteps as I walked to my car, each click of my heels a countdown to tomorrow's reckoning. Tomorrow, they would think they were destroying me again. Instead, it would be the first step in my carefully orchestrated plan. Surprise! The shout echoed around the private dining room of Maison Bleu as I entered on Marcus's arm, feigning perfect shock at the gathering of family, friends, and business associates. The champagne glasses clinked, the sound piercing through the chatter as waiters circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres and flutes of bubbling liquid. Oh my God! I gasped, hand flying to my heart in a performance I'd rehearsed in the mirror that morning. You guys! Marcus's arm tightened around my waist, his cologne, sandalwood and something sharper, wrapping around me like a cloud. Happy early birthday, sweetheart. My father stepped forward to kiss my cheek, the scratch of his beard against my skin so familiar it almost broke my composure. You deserve it, princess. I scanned the room, noting who was present. The same crowd as last time. My father's business partners, a few of my college friends who'd lost touch after my breakdown, and Rose's theater group who had never liked me much anyway. The room hummed with conversation and laughter, the crystal chandeliers casting everything in a flattering golden glow. I can't believe you did all this, I said to Marcus, knowing exactly who had really organized everything. My sister stood by the cake table, resplendent in a green dress that complemented her eyes, her red hair cascading over one shoulder. She caught my gaze and raised her champagne glass in a mock toast, a secretive smile playing at her lips. The evening progressed exactly as I remembered. The same toast, the same jokes at my expense disguised as affection. The same moment when my father clinked his glass to call for attention. Just like before, Marcus moved to stand beside him, a conspiratorial grin on his handsome face. If I could have everyone's attention, my father announced, his deep voice silencing the room. We're actually celebrating 2 wonderful occasions tonight. I felt eyes turn to me, expecting the traditional birthday speech. but I knew better. I took a sip of champagne, the bitter taste flooding my mouth as I braced myself. As you all know, Vivian's birthday is next week, my father continued. But tonight, I'm thrilled to announce some news that will make our family even stronger. Marcus stepped forward, his green eyes finding mine with a look of practiced apology. Vivian, I hope you'll understand. Sometimes the heart wants what it wants. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. My college friend Melissa leaned toward me, whispering, "What's happening?" I didn't answer, just kept my eyes on Marcus as he reached out. Not for me, but for my sister. Rose stepped forward, her face a perfect mask of regretful happiness as she took his hand. Rose and I have fallen in love, Marcus announced to the stunned room. And today, she agreed to become my wife. The gasps around me created a symphony of shock. I watched as Rose extended her left hand, where my grandmother's emerald ring, the one I'd thought was being resized for me, glittered under the chandelier lights. We didn't mean for this to happen, Rose added, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. But we couldn't fight our feelings any longer. All eyes turned to me, waiting for the breakdown they'd soon be gossiping about over brunches and business meetings. The air conditioner hummed loudly in the sudden silence, the cold air raising goosebumps on my exposed arms. I set down my champagne glass with deliberate care, feeling the smooth crystal against my fingertips. Then I did what no one expected. I smiled. I'm happy for you both, I said, my voice clear and steady. Truly. The confusion on their faces was almost worth the humiliation. This wasn't in their script. In my previous life, I'd crumbled publicly. Tears, accusations, fleeing the restaurant while photographers my sister had tipped off captured my distress for the society pages. Vivian? My father looked uncertain, his bushy eyebrows drawn together in confusion. I walked toward the newly announced couple, the click of my heels against the hardwood floor punctuating each step. The room held its collective breath as I stopped before them, the scent of Rose's lilac perfume mingling with Marcus's sandalwood cologne in a nauseating combination. Life is too short for regrets, I said, embracing first my sister, then Marcus. I wish you every happiness. As I hugged Marcus, I whispered in his ear, I hope she's worth what this will cost you. He pulled back, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but I was already turning to address the room. Let's celebrate, I declared, raising my refilled champagne glass. To new beginnings. The party resumed with an undercurrent of awkward tension. I circulated among the guests with a serene smile, accepting condolences with grace and deflecting pity with humor. All the while, my mind was on the 7 a.m. meeting I'd scheduled with our corporate security team. 3 hours later, I sat alone in my office at Lancaster Group headquarters, the only illumination coming from my computer screen. The building was empty at this hour, just as I'd planned. The distant hum of the cleaning crew's vacuum provided a rhythmic backdrop to my work. I inserted the flash drive Richard had prepared for me and began the systematic examination of our company's financial records. The clicking of computer keys punctuated my growing resolve as document after document confirmed what I already knew. Marcus had been embezzling from the company for years, with small transfers that added up to millions. In my previous life, I'd discovered this too late, after he'd married Rose and my father had already pushed me out of the company. By then, they'd covered their tracks, and my emotional instability had made my accusations seem like the ravings of a jilted woman. This time, I had proof. I compiled the evidence methodically, the blue light of the screen reflecting off my face as I worked through the night. By morning, I had everything I needed: account numbers, transfer dates, forged approvals with my electronic signature. I forwarded the evidence to my personal email, then to Richard's secure server, and finally to my lawyer with instructions to hold it in trust. Then, I deleted all traces of my investigation from the company system. I couldn't move against Marcus yet, not without exposing my foreknowledge. But I could prepare. The next day, Marcus called as I'd expected. His voice held a practiced blend of remorse and relief when I answered. Vivian, can we meet? I think we should talk about what happened. Of course, I agreed, infusing my voice with just the right amount of residual hurt. The park near my apartment in an hour? The park bench where we met faced a small pond, ducks gliding across its surface in lazy patterns. The October air carried a crisp chill. dead leaves crunching under our feet as we walked in uncomfortable silence before sitting. "I want you to know," he began, "I never meant to hurt you." I stared at the pond, watching ripples expand and fade as a duck dove beneath the surface. The earthy smell of decaying leaves filled my nostrils with each breath. "How long?" I asked quietly. Marcus shifted beside me, his leather jacket creaking with the movement. "Does it matter?" "I suppose not," I conceded. In my previous life, I demanded details, each one a fresh wound. This time, I already knew them all. "Rose and I would like a clean break," he said, relief evident in his voice at my apparent calm. "No messy office politics or family tension. Your father suggested I speak with you about staying on at Lancaster Group?" I turned to look at him then, taking in the face I'd once loved. The sharp jawline, the green eyes, that crinkled when he smiled. The slight scar above his right eyebrow from a childhood accident. He'd told me the story on our third date, and I'd thought it made him seem vulnerable and real. "You want my blessing to keep embezzling from my family's company?" The words nearly escaped my lips, but I caught them just in time. Instead, I nodded slowly. "I think that would be for the best. We're all adults, after all." The relief that washed over his face was almost comical. He'd expected tears, recriminations, threats. My acceptance threw him off balance. "There's one more thing," he said, reaching into his pocket. "Your grandmother's ring. Rose thinks it might be better if we use something else. Given the circumstances." He held out the emerald ring, my inheritance, with an apologetic smile. The sunlight caught the deep green stone, sending sparks of color dancing across his palm. "Of course," I said, taking it from him. The metal was warm from his pocket, the weight of it familiar in my hand. "I'm sure you'll find something perfect." As our meeting concluded, I reached out to embrace him. "I wish you and Rose nothing but happiness," I said, my chin resting on his shoulder. With my face hidden from his view, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile as I pressed send on the pre-written email to my lawyer containing proof of Marcus's latest fraudulent transaction, one he'd completed just this morning, thinking himself still untouchable. The following weekend, Rose visited my apartment, ostensibly to check on me, but really to scout what she would soon try to claim in the aftermath of my expected breakdown. In my previous life, I'd been too devastated to notice how her eyes cataloged my possessions as we spoke. "This place always feels so peaceful," she commented, running her fingers along the spines of books on my shelf. The gentle rasp of her manicured nails against leather bindings grated on my nerves. "Thank you," I replied, setting down a tray with tea and cookies. The porcelain cups clinked delicately against their saucers. "It's my sanctuary." Rose wandered to the large abstract painting that dominated one wall, a Rothko-inspired piece that had quadrupled in value since I'd purchased it from an up-and-coming artist. "I've always loved this," she said with practiced casualness. "It ties the whole room together." "Do you think so?" I glanced at the painting as if seeing it anew. "I've been thinking it might be time for a change." Her eyes lit up exactly as I'd anticipated. "If you're redecorating, I'd be happy to take it off your hands. Just to keep it in the family, of course." The eagerness in her voice was barely concealed. In my previous life, she'd claimed most of my art collection during my downward spiral, selling pieces to fund her lifestyle with Marcus once they'd drained their own resources. "You know what?" I said, moving to stand beside her. "Why don't you borrow it? And the Jensen sculpture in the hallway that you've always admired. You and Marcus should have beautiful things around you as you start your life together." Rose turned to me with surprise, her eyes narrowing slightly in suspicion before she masked it with a smile. "Are you sure? That's incredibly generous." "What is family for, if not to support each other?" I replied, sipping my tea. The hot liquid warmed my throat, fortifying me against the coldness I felt toward the woman who had once been not just my sister, but my best friend. As Rose left that afternoon, arms laden with borrowed artwork worth over $500,000, I made a quick call to my insurance company to document the loans and their conditions, including the stipulation that they must be returned upon request or financial restitution would be required. Another piece of my plan clicked into place as neat and precise as the sound of my front door locking behind her retreating figure. The whispers reached me before I even stepped off the elevator Monday morning. Conversations halted abruptly as I walked past, only to resume in hushed tones once I'd turned the corner. The office felt different, the air heavier, charged with unspoken words that scraped against my skin like sandpaper. "Good morning, Janice," I greeted my assistant as I passed her desk. She looked up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, Miss Lancaster. Your father would like to see you in his office when you have a moment." "Thank you," I replied, noting how she avoided direct eye contact. "Could you bring me the Nakamura files first? I'd like to review them before the meeting." "Of course," she said, but I caught her glance toward my father's office where his assistant gave a small nod. I closed my office door behind me and took a deep breath. The familiar scent of leather and paper normally calmed me, but today it provided little comfort. My phone buzzed almost immediately, a text from my college friend Melissa. "Are you okay? Just heard rumors about you having a breakdown after the party. Call me." So it had begun. Just as before, Marcus and Rose were spinning their narrative. Poor Vivian. Unstable after being left for her more vibrant sister. Unfit to handle the pressures of the company. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I pulled up the recorded meeting minutes from the previous week, when I'd quietly installed a new protocol requiring two-factor authentication for all financial transfers over $10,000. A small change that had passed without comment, but would prove crucial in the days to come. The intercom buzzed, Janice's voice tentative. "Your father is asking if you'll be joining him soon." "I'll be right there," I responded, gathering the Nakamura files I'd already memorized. My father's office occupied the corner of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. He stood looking out at the skyline as I entered, his imposing figure silhouetted against the morning light. "Close the door, Vivian," he said without turning. I did as instructed, then took a seat across from his massive desk without being invited to. The leather chair creaked under my weight, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense silence. "I've been hearing some concerning reports," he began, finally turning to face me. The heavy scent of his expensive cologne, the same one he'd worn throughout my childhood, wafted toward me, no longer comforting but nauseating. "About your behavior since the announcement." "My behavior?" I repeated, keeping my tone neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean." He settled into his chair, the custom Italian leather sighing beneath him. "Marcus mentioned you seemed unusually calm at your meeting, almost detached." I placed the Nakamura files on his desk. I wasn't aware that processing a betrayal with dignity was cause for concern. My father's eyebrows drew together, the same expression he wore when confronting a business rival. "Don't be dramatic, Vivian. These things happen. Rose and Marcus have a connection that predates your engagement. In my previous life, this revelation had shattered me, the knowledge that their affair had been ongoing throughout my relationship with Marcus. This time, I simply nodded. "I'm aware," I said calmly, "which is why I've decided to focus on what truly matters, our company's future. The Nakamura deal, for instance, has several overlooked opportunities I've outlined on page 12. He ignored the folder. "Marcus and others have expressed concerns about your stability. Given the circumstances, perhaps it would be best if you took some time away from the office." There it was, the first move to edge me out just as before. My hands remained steady in my lap, but inside I felt a surge of cold fury. "I'm perfectly stable," I replied, my voice even. "But I understand the concern. Tell me, Dad, when did you first approve Marcus's request to bypass the standard verification process for vendor payments?" His face remained impassive, but I caught the subtle tightening around his eyes. "I'm not sure what you're referring to." "No?" I smiled slightly. "It's just that I've been reviewing our internal controls as part of the Nakamura preparation. There seem to be some irregularities." My father leaned forward, his massive desk no longer feeling like a barrier but a battleground between us. "Be careful, Vivian. Grief can make people see problems where none exist." "Perhaps," I conceded, rising from my chair. "But numbers don't lie, and documents have a way of preserving the truth. I'll take your suggestion under advisement. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with legal about our compliance protocols." As I reached the door, his voice stopped me. Vivian, family should come first. Always. I turned, one hand on the doorknob. I couldn't agree more, Dad. That's precisely why I'm concerned about who's been stealing from our family. The family dinner that night was excruciating. Rose brought Marcus, their hands intertwined on the table as we ate in our father's formal dining room. The chandelier cast harsh shadows across their faces, the crystal tinkling slightly whenever the heating system activated with a low hum. "I've been meaning to ask," Rose said, taking a delicate bite of her salmon. "Will you be attending the charity gala next week? It might be best if you skipped it this year, given everything." The charity gala was Lancaster Group's biggest social event of the year, where we announced our annual initiatives and courted potential partners. In my previous life, I'd allowed myself to be pushed out of attending. The resulting photos of Rose, Marcus, and my father, presenting a united front, had cemented the narrative of my exclusion from both family and business. "Actually," I replied, taking a sip of wine, "I've already confirmed my attendance. The Nakamura family specifically requested I be there to discuss their investment." My father set down his fork with a sharp clink against fine china. "The Nakamuras? When did you speak with them?" "Yesterday," I said casually. Hiro called to express his condolences about my broken engagement. Apparently, news travels fast. This was a calculated move. In reality, I'd cultivated a relationship with Hiro Nakamura over the past week, something I'd failed to do in my previous life, and secured his support for my leadership. "You had no authority to discuss business matters with them," my father said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Marcus is handling that account." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his knife scraping against his plate with a sound that set my teeth on edge. "It's fine, Robert. I'm sure Vivian was just being polite." "I was," I agreed with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Just as I was being polite when I mentioned to Hiro that our company would be undergoing a comprehensive audit before finalizing any international partnerships." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with the silver knives clutched in their suddenly tense hands. Rose's face paled slightly, her freckles standing out in sharp contrast. "An audit?" she repeated, her voice higher than usual. "Why would we need that? It would just delay everything." "Transparency is important in international business," I replied easily. "Wouldn't you agree, Marcus?" He cleared his throat, reaching for his water glass. "Of course, but timing is also crucial." "Vivian," my father interjected, setting down his napkin with deliberate care, "I think it's clear you're still processing recent events. Perhaps you should consider taking a leave of absence. For your health." The words hit exactly as they had before, a public suggestion of instability, a gentle push toward the exit. But this time, I was prepared. "My health is excellent," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "But I appreciate your concern. Now, shall we discuss the presentation for the gala? I've taken the liberty of preparing some remarks about our family's commitment to integrity." 2 days later, I accidentally overheard a conversation that, in my previous life, had been the final nail in my professional coffin. Pressing my phone's record button, I quietly positioned myself outside the partially open door of my father's office, where voices drifted out into the empty hallway. "She's becoming a problem," my father was saying, his voice tight with frustration. "Asking questions about the accounts, scheduling meetings with department heads." "I told you she seemed too calm," Marcus replied. "The Vivian I know should have been a mess after what happened." Rose's voice joined them, lower and more cautious. "She's been different since before the party, more focused. It's unnerving." "Whatever the reason," my father continued, "we need to accelerate our timeline. After the gala, we'll announce the new executive structure. Vivian will be offered a sabbatical, non-negotiable. If she refuses, we'll have Dr. Reynolds provide a recommendation about her fitness for leadership." "Is he still willing to do that?" Marcus asked, "without examining her?" My father's laugh was short and harsh. "For what I pay him, he'd diagnose the Queen of England by telegram." I'd heard enough. Slipping away silently, I sent the recording to my secure email, then to my lawyer. 3 years at boarding school with Rose had taught me how to move without making a sound, a skill that had proven unexpectedly useful in corporate espionage. The engagement party Rose and Marcus threw at the Belvedere, my favorite venue where Marcus and I had planned to have our wedding reception, was the perfect opportunity for the next phase of my plan. I arrived fashionably late, dressed in a red gown that drew appreciative glances and confused double takes from those who expected me to be hiding at home. Vivian! Rose's voice held a note of panic as she spotted me entering. You came. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied, kissing her cheek. The scent of lilac perfume made my stomach turn, but I kept my smile fixed in place. You look beautiful. And she did. In a white dress that closely resembled a wedding gown, her red hair swept up to showcase diamond earrings I recognized from our mother's collection. Another inheritance she'd claimed as her own. Thank you for coming, Marcus said, joining us with champagne flutes in hand. It means a lot. I accepted the glass, raising it in a toast. To new beginnings, I said, the same words I'd offered at my ruined surprise party. As I circulated among the guests, I made sure to be seen speaking amicably with key business partners and board members, my phone discreetly in hand as I finalized the paperwork that would give me controlling interest in Lancaster Group come morning. When Rose clinked her glass for attention, announcing their wedding date would be on my birthday, to create a new happy memory for that day, I simply smiled and congratulated them while pressing send on an email that would begin the process of freezing several of the company's subsidiary accounts for suspicious activity. Actually, I said, stepping forward as applause died down, I'd love to host your engagement dinner next month, at my penthouse. It would be my gift to you both. The surprise on their faces was worth the discomfort of extending the invitation. Rose recovered first, her eyes calculating even as she embraced me. That's so generous, she gushed. Isn't it, Marcus? He nodded, suspicion warring with relief in his expression. Very generous. What else is family for? I replied, the words hollow in my mouth as I raised my glass once more. If you'll excuse me, I need to make a quick call. In the venue's opulent bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and leaned against the marble wall, allowing myself 5 seconds to breathe through the rage. The cool stone pressed against my back through the thin fabric of my dress, anchoring me to the present moment. This was the night in my previous life when I'd finally accepted the totality of their betrayal. I'd fled the party early, driven to a cliff overlooking the ocean, and contemplated ending everything. Instead, I'd fallen asleep in my car and awakened to the news that Lancaster Group was facing financial irregularities, with my signature on the questionable transactions. This time would be different. This time, I would be the architect of their downfall, not its victim. As I reapplied my lipstick in the bathroom mirror, I noticed something strange in my reflection. For just a moment, my eyes seemed to flash with an inner light, numbers and stock tickers scrolling across my pupils like data on a screen. I blinked, and it was gone, but a new awareness remained. A crystal-clear vision of financial flows, market movements, investment opportunities that hadn't yet materialized. I gripped the marble countertop, steadying myself as understanding dawned. My rebirth hadn't just given me a second chance with my memories intact. It had given me something else, an ability to see financial futures, to track the flow of money like a sixth sense. This explained how I'd known exactly which investments to make this past week, how I'd anticipated market shifts that should have been unpredictable. It wasn't just memory, it was something more. I straightened, a slow smile spreading across my face as I realized the true extent of my advantage. With this gift, I could anticipate and counter every move my family made, and ensure their downfall was even more complete than I'd initially planned. The 3 weeks leading up to the engagement dinner passed in a blur of careful preparations and quiet power moves. I maintained my outward appearance of grudging acceptance while systematically dismantling the financial architecture my father, sister, and ex-fiancé had built over years. Most mornings, I woke before dawn, my mind already racing with financial insights that came to me in dreams. Stock movements, currency fluctuations, acquisition opportunities that wouldn't be publicly known for days. The taste of revenge was sweet as honey on my tongue as I sipped my morning coffee, watching the sunrise paint the sky in colors that seemed brighter in this second chance at life. What no one knew, what no one could possibly know, was that I'd been gathering evidence of their financial misconduct since the day of my rebirth. Every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, Every laundered dollar through shell companies had been meticulously documented and secured in multiple locations. My father's voicemail from 3 days ago played in my mind as I dressed for my meeting with the foreign investors. Vivian, call me back immediately. There's a problem with the Westlake acquisition numbers, and stay away from the Tokyo office. They're not your concern. I smiled at the memory. He had no idea I'd already spoken with our Tokyo partners, securing their support for the leadership transition I was quietly orchestrating. The smooth silk of my blouse slid against my skin as I buttoned it, a sensation that reminded me I was alive, present, and in control. The downtown financial district hummed with energy as I made my way to the private dining room I'd reserved at the St. Regis. The leather portfolio in my hands felt like power incarnate. Inside were the documents that would change everything, ready for signatures. The investors were already waiting when I arrived. Takashi Mori from Tokyo, Elise Laurent from Paris, and Stefan Gruber from Berlin. None of them had existing relationships with Lancaster Group. In my previous life, I'd discovered them too late, after I'd already been ousted. Miss Lancaster, Takashi greeted me, rising from his seat. A pleasure to finally meet in person. The pleasure is mine, I replied, setting my portfolio on the polished table. The weight of it made a satisfying thud against the wood. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. Elise's sharp eyes assessed me. Your proposal was intriguing, especially the projections for Q3. Which would seem impossible, Stefan added, if not for your remarkable track record these past 3 weeks. My newfound ability had allowed me to make several high-profile investment calls that had paid off spectacularly, establishing my credibility with these potential partners in record time. Those were merely opening moves, I told them, the scent of fresh coffee filling the room as a waiter silently poured cups for each of us. The rich aroma bolstered my confidence as I continued. Lancaster Group has untapped potential that my current leadership team has deliberately suppressed. You mean your father? Elise said bluntly, stirring her coffee. The gentle clink of her spoon against fine china punctuated her words. And your former fiancé. Yes, I acknowledged. Their mismanagement and, in some cases, outright fraud has held us back for years. Yet you're asking us to invest in this same company? Stefan leaned forward, his skepticism evident. I opened my portfolio and slid documents toward each of them. I'm asking you to invest in a company that will soon have new leadership and a completely restructured governance model, one that includes significant positions for each of your firms. What followed was a 2-hour presentation of my vision for Lancaster Group's future, global expansion, technological integration, and a transparency model that would set new industry standards. By the time dessert arrived, all three had signed the preliminary agreements. There's one more thing, I said as they prepared to leave. The announcement of our partnership needs to coincide exactly with the timing we discussed. No earlier, no later. Takashi nodded, understanding the delicate choreography required. The transfer of shares will be complete by Friday. You'll have controlling interest before your family dinner. Perfect, I replied, rising to shake their hands. I look forward to our partnership. As I left the St. Regis, my phone buzzed with a text from Rose. Calling to confirm you're still hosting engagement dinner Friday? Need to finalize guest list. I texted back a simple, yes, everything is arranged, and slipped my phone into my pocket, feeling the weight of it against my hip like a loaded gun. Back at my office, I found Marcus waiting outside my door, his expression carefully neutral. The faint scent of his cologne triggered a cascade of memories, both from this life and my previous one, that I pushed aside with practiced ease. Vivian, he greeted me, straightening his tie. Do you have a minute? I unlocked my office door, gesturing him inside. Of course, what can I do for you? He waited until the door closed behind us before speaking. I wanted to discuss the Tokyo account. Your father mentioned you've been in contact with them. Just routine follow-up, I replied, settling behind my desk. The leather of my chair creaked softly as I leaned back. Why? Is there a problem? Marcus remained standing, his fingers drumming against his thigh in a nervous gesture I remembered well. They've been asking questions about our organizational structure, questions they shouldn't be asking at this stage. Perhaps they're simply doing their due diligence, I suggested. International partners tend to be thorough. Or perhaps someone has been sharing inappropriate information, he countered, his green eyes narrowing slightly. Look, Vivian, I know things have been difficult, but undermining company relationships won't help anyone. I raised an eyebrow. Is that what you think I'm doing? Undermining relationships? He had the grace to look uncomfortable, his gaze dropping to the carpet. I'm just saying, sometimes emotions can cloud judgment. And with Rose and me? Marcus, I interrupted, my voice soft but firm. Let me assure you, my emotions aren't clouding anything. In fact, I've never seen more clearly. Something in my tone made him look up sharply. For a moment, I wondered if I'd revealed too much, but he simply nodded, perhaps misinterpreting my words as acceptance. Good, he said, relaxing slightly. That's good to hear, so we'll see you Friday? For the dinner? Absolutely, I confirmed. I wouldn't miss it for the world. After he left, I turned to my computer and pulled up the company's financial dashboard, a system I'd had upgraded immediately upon my return. The new interface allowed me to track every transaction in real time, a capability that had already proven invaluable, and as I watched, a notification appeared. Someone was attempting to transfer funds from our main operational account to a subsidiary in the Cayman Islands. The transaction required my approval, thanks to the new protocols I'd implemented. I smiled, denied the request, and made a note of the attempt. Another piece of evidence for my growing collection. The day before the engagement dinner, Rose and Marcus announced their wedding date in the society pages. May 15th, my birthday, just as they'd planned. The coincidence had seemed merely thoughtless in my previous life. Now I recognized it for the deliberate humiliation it was intended to be. I sat at my kitchen island, the newspaper spread before me as I ate my breakfast. The toasted sourdough crunched between my teeth as I studied their smiling faces in the announcement photo. They looked perfect together, her vibrant coloring complementing his more subdued handsomeness. In another life, the sight had reduced me to tears. In this one, it merely strengthened my resolve. My phone rang. Hiro Nakamura, right on schedule. Vivian-san, his voice greeted me when I answered. I've reviewed the documentation you sent. It is most concerning. Yes, I agreed, taking another bite of my toast. Which is why the timing of our announcement is crucial. My family's reputation is paramount, he continued. We cannot be associated with such practices. You won't be, I assured him. By the time our partnership is public, Lancaster Group will have a completely new management structure. You have my word. There was a brief pause. Your word has proven reliable thus far. Very well, we will proceed as discussed. After ending the call, I opened my laptop to check the markets. The numbers scrolled across the screen, but I hardly needed them anymore. My newfound ability allowed me to sense financial movements before they happened, like feeling the vibrations of an approaching train through the tracks. Today I could feel something significant brewing in the tech sector, a shift that wouldn't be apparent to others for at least 48 hours. Acting on this insight, I quickly placed several personal trades, then turned my attention to Lancaster Group's portfolio, positioning our investments to benefit from the coming change. This strange new power had manifested gradually over the past month. At first, I'd thought my successful predictions were simply due to my foreknowledge of events from my previous life. But I soon realized it went beyond that. I could anticipate market movements that had nothing to do with my prior experiences, sense financial opportunities that hadn't existed before. The gifts seemed to strengthen with use, like a muscle developing through exercise. Now, sitting at my kitchen island with coffee growing cold beside me, I closed my eyes and extended my awareness further than I ever had before, searching for patterns in the global financial ecosystem. Images flashed behind my eyelids, currency values adjusting, commodities shifting, stock prices rising and falling in complex patterns. I could see it all, a vast, interconnected web of transactions and value exchanges spanning the planet. And there, in the middle of it all, I could see Lancaster Group. Its true financial state laid bare to my enhanced perception. What I saw confirmed what I'd already suspected. My father, Rose, and Marcus had been systematically looting the company for years, funneling assets into their personal accounts through an elaborate network of shell companies and fraudulent transactions. In my previous life, they'd managed to pin those transactions on me, using my electronic signature and position as the nominal head of the company to make me the scapegoat for their crimes. I'd been too devastated by their personal betrayal to mount an effective defense, and by the time I'd gathered my wits, the evidence had been destroyed. This time would be different. This time, I was ready. I opened my eyes, a plan fully formed in my mind. Tomorrow night's dinner wouldn't just be an engagement celebration, it would be the stage for their complete and very public downfall. Taking a final sip of my now cold coffee, I picked up my phone and made one last call to the catering company handling tomorrow's event. Yes, I'd like to make a change to the audiovisual setup, I instructed. I'll need a projector and screen. Yes, for a special presentation. A surprise for the happy couple. The evening of the engagement dinner arrived with a sense of inevitability. I stood in my penthouse, surveying the transformation of my living space into an elegant dining venue. White roses and lilies adorned every surface, their heady fragrance filling the air. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, throwing rainbows across the white tablecloth. Everything was perfect, exactly as I'd planned. The caterers moved efficiently around me, putting final touches on the table settings while the bartender arranged bottles behind the makeshift bar. The projector had been discreetly set up, connected to my laptop, but concealed behind an arrangement of flowers until needed. Miss Lancaster? My housekeeper approached, her voice lowering conspiratorially. Your sister just called from the lobby. She and Mr. Donovan are on their way up with your father. Perfect timing, I replied, smoothing down the front of my crimson dress. Please let them in when they arrive. I moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the city skyline, twilight painting the sky in deepening shades of purple and blue. My reflection stared back at me. Hair elegantly styled, makeup flawless, expression composed. Only the slight trembling of the crystal glass in my hand betrayed the anticipation coursing through me. The elevator dinged, announcing their arrival. I took a deep breath, set down my glass, and turned to greet my guests with a practiced smile. Rose, Marcus, Dad, I exclaimed, moving toward them with open arms. Welcome! Rose embraced me stiffly, her lilac perfume momentarily overwhelming. The place looks amazing, she said, her eyes darting around to take inventory of any changes since her last visit. You didn't have to go to all this trouble. Nonsense, I replied, kissing her cheek. It's not every day my sister gets engaged. My father handed me a bottle of champagne. Dom Perignon, the same brand we'd had at my ruined surprise party. You're looking well, Princess, he said, studying my face carefully. More settled. I feel settled, I assured him, accepting the bottle with a nod of thanks. Amazing what clarity can do for one's perspective. Marcus hung back slightly, his discomfort evident in the way he shifted his weight from foot to foot. The rustle of his suit jacket seemed unnaturally loud in the momentary silence. Can I offer anyone a drink? I asked, breaking the tension. The other guests should be arriving shortly. Rose's head snapped up. Other guests? I thought this was just family. I took the liberty of inviting a few key business associates, I explained, moving toward the bar. I thought it would be a good opportunity to introduce them to the future of Lancaster Group leadership. My father's eyebrows drew together in concern, but before he could object, the elevator announced the arrival of more guests. Within 20 minutes, my penthouse was filled with board members, major clients, and the foreign investors I'd been courting, all mingling somewhat awkwardly as they sensed the underlying tension. Dinner proceeded with superficial pleasantness, the conversation staying carefully within safe topics, the unusually warm weather, an upcoming charity event, a new restaurant that had opened downtown. I remained the perfect hostess, ensuring glasses stayed filled and steering the discussion whenever it veered toward business. As dessert was served, a delicate creme brulee that cracked satisfyingly under the spoon, I stood and tapped my glass with a silver spoon. The crystal emitted a clear, high note that silenced the table immediately. I'd like to propose a toast, I announced, looking around at the assembled guests. The chandelier light reflected in my crystal glass, sending prisms of color dancing across the white tablecloth. To Rose and Marcus. All eyes turned to the couple, who smiled uncertainly from their places at the other end of the table. When I first learned of their relationship, I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me, I was, understandably, surprised. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled around the table. Rose's smile froze in place, wariness creeping into her eyes. But over these past weeks, I've come to see their union as the catalyst for some necessary changes, both personally and professionally. My father shifted in his seat, his napkin clutched tightly in one hand. "Vivian," he said quietly, a warning in his tone. I smiled at him reassuringly. "It's all right, Dad. I've accepted the situation. In fact, I've been inspired to make some changes myself." With that, I pressed a button on the remote concealed in my hand. The flower arrangement beside the far wall parted, revealing the projector screen. My PowerPoint presentation illuminated with the Lancaster Group logo prominently displayed. "Since we have most of our board and key partners here tonight," I said casually, "I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to share some recent findings about our company's financial health." Rose half rose from her seat. "Vivian, this isn't the time." "On the contrary," I interrupted smoothly, advancing to the first slide. "There's no better time to discuss integrity and transparency than when celebrating a new partnership." The screen now displayed a series of transaction records, highlighted entries showing suspicious transfers from company accounts to offshore entities. "Over the past month," I continued, my voice taking on a more formal tone, "I've conducted a thorough review of Lancaster Group's financial activities. What I found was troubling. The room had gone completely still, the only sound the gentle hum of the air conditioning. I could feel all eyes fixed either on me or the damning evidence displayed behind me. "These transactions," I said, pointing to the screen, "represent over $20 million diverted from company accounts over the past 3 years. Each transfer was authorized using my electronic signature, a signature I never provided." Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "This is inappropriate," he declared, looking around at the stunned guests. "Vivian is clearly still processing her personal disappointment, and this display is documented evidence of fraud," I finished for him, advancing to the next slide. "Here we have examples of my authentic signature compared to the ones used for these transactions. Our forensic accountants confirmed the forgery last week." Gasps echoed around the table as understanding dawned on the guests' faces. Rose's complexion had gone alarmingly pale, her freckles standing out like spattered paint against white canvas. "Vivian," my father's voice had hardened, all pretense of familial warmth gone. "Stop this immediately." I turned to him, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Dad, especially since further investigation revealed your direct involvement in the scheme." The next slide displayed emails between my father and Marcus, discussing how to structure the fraudulent transactions to avoid detection. The incriminating messages had been deleted from the company's servers, but my newfound abilities had helped me trace and recover them from forgotten backups. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Several board members pushed back from the table, distancing themselves physically from my family as if their corruption might be contagious. "This is absurd!" my father thundered, rising to his feet. His face had flushed deep red, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple. "I built Lancaster Group from nothing. I would never jeopardize its future." "Perhaps you'd like to explain these then," I suggested, advancing to a slide showing bank statements from his personal account, deposits corresponding exactly to the suspicious withdrawals from company funds, and the evidence was overwhelming, each slide more damning than the last. Bank records, emails, forged documents. I laid bare 3 years of systematic theft that had nearly destroyed the company in my previous life. Rose had begun to cry, mascara streaking down her face in black rivers. "Vivian, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "We can talk about this privately, as a family." "We stopped being a family," I replied quietly, "the moment you chose your own interests over our shared legacy." I advanced to the final slide, a simple statement announcing my acquisition of controlling interest in Lancaster Group, effective as of that morning. The champagne bottle on the sideboard popped at that exact moment, the cork flying across the room like a final punctuation mark. "As of 9 a.m. today," I announced to the stunned room, "I own 67% of Lancaster Group shares. My first act as majority shareholder has been to request a formal investigation into these financial irregularities." I turned to address the board members directly. "You'll find a full report in your email inboxes, along with my recommendations for restructuring the executive team." Marcus lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. You can't do this. The company is a family trust. A trust that named me as the primary beneficiary, I corrected him. A detail you overlooked when forging my signature on those transfer authorizations. My father pushed past Marcus, approaching me with hands outstretched in a placating gesture. The expensive cologne that had once represented security now reeked of desperation. Vivian Princess, let's discuss this rationally. Whatever you think happened, is documented in extensive detail, I finished for him, and has already been reported to the SEC, along with evidence that the three of you were planning to frame me for these irregularities, just as you attempted to question my mental stability when I began looking into the accounts. The room had fallen into a shocked silence, broken only by Rose's quiet sobbing. The crystal glasses on the table caught the light, fracturing it into rainbow patterns that danced across the horrified faces of my family. I've also taken the liberty, I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me, of freezing your personal accounts pending investigation. The evidence suggests most of your assets were acquired through fraudulent means. You've frozen our accounts! Rose's voice rose to a near shriek. All of them? I nodded. Effective immediately, in simpler terms, you're bankrupt. Marcus staggered slightly, reaching for the back of a chair to steady himself. You can't. I can and I have, I interrupted. The three of you stole from me, from our company, and from every employee who trusted you. Your comfortable lifestyles were built on fraud, and that ends tonight. My father's face had drained of color, the realization of his complete downfall finally sinking in. What do you want? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Money? Power? Name your price. I smiled, a genuine smile that felt foreign on my face after weeks of pretense. I already have both, Dad. What I want is justice and the satisfaction of watching you face consequences for your actions. As if on cue, the elevator doors opened and two men in dark suits entered. My security team, right on schedule. Miss Lancaster, one of them addressed me with a nod. Is there a problem here? No problem, I replied, glancing at my shattered family. My guests were just leaving. The room slowly emptied, board members and business associates making awkward excuses as they fled the uncomfortable scene. Only Takashi, Elise, and Stefan remained, watching from a respectful distance as my family was escorted to the elevator. At the last moment, Rose turned back, her tear-streaked face a mask of disbelief. Why like this? She asked, gesturing around at the elegant dinner setting. Why humiliate us publicly? I approached her slowly, stopping just close enough to speak without being overheard by the others. Because that's exactly what you planned for me, I said softly. The difference is I actually had evidence to back my claims. The elevator doors closed on their stunned faces, and suddenly the penthouse felt larger, the air easier to breathe. I turned to my remaining guests with a smile that felt lighter than any I'd worn in years, in either lifetime. I apologize for the dramatic end to our dinner, I said, moving toward the bar to pour fresh drinks. But I believe this calls for a toast. To new beginnings, for real this time. Takashi accepted his glass with a respectful nod. Most impressive, Vivian-san. You've handled this with surprising efficiency. Indeed, Elise agreed, studying me with newfound respect. Though I confess, I'm curious about your timing. You could have exposed them at any point in the past month. Why wait until tonight? I sipped my champagne, the bubbles dancing on my tongue as I considered her question. The truth, that I'd wanted them to feel the same public humiliation they'd inflicted on me in another life, seemed too personal to share. Strategy, I replied instead. I needed to secure the company's future before addressing its past. Speaking of which, shall we discuss our plans for the Asian expansion? As the conversation shifted to business, I felt a strange sense of completion, as if a chapter had closed, allowing a new one to begin. The evidence I'd gathered was irrefutable, the timing impeccable. By morning, the financial world would be buzzing with news of Lancaster Group's dramatic leadership change and the scandal that precipitated it. My family's downfall was complete, their betrayal returned tenfold. And I, the once discarded daughter, had emerged not just unbroken but triumphant. 3 days after the disastrous dinner party, I sat in my new office, my father's former space, reviewing the contracts for our expansion into Asian markets. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warming the leather of my chair as I worked. The distant sounds of the city below created a soothing background hum, punctuated occasionally by the ping of incoming emails. Lancaster Group was in turmoil, of course. News of the fraud allegations and leadership change had sent shockwaves through the business community. But I'd been prepared for the chaos, implementing contingency plans that had stabilized our stock price and reassured major clients. The intercom buzzed, my new assistant's voice coming through clearly. "Miss Lancaster, your sister is here. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." I paused, pen hovering over the document I'd been annotating. I'd been expecting this visit, though perhaps not quite so soon. "Send her in, please," I instructed, setting aside my work and straightening in my chair. The door opened to reveal Rose, nearly unrecognizable from the polished socialite who'd flaunted her engagement at my party just weeks ago. Her hair hung limp around her face, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a plain sweater. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, evidence of recent tears. "Vivian," she began, her voice catching, "I need to talk to you." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please sit." She moved forward hesitantly, perching on the edge of the seat as if afraid to fully commit to her position. The squeak of leather chairs as I swiveled slightly away from her pleas punctuated the tense silence between us. "I've been trying to call you," she said finally. "You haven't answered." "I've been busy," I replied, my tone neutral. "Rebuilding what you three nearly destroyed takes considerable effort." Rose leaned forward, desperation evident in every line of her body. "Viv, please, you've made your point. You've humiliated us, taken control of the company. Isn't that enough?" I studied her face, the face I'd once trusted implicitly. The sister who'd been my confidant and best friend before betraying me in the most personal way possible. "Tell me something, Rose," I said quietly. "If the situations were reversed, if you discovered what I had, would you have shown mercy?" She blinked rapidly, caught off guard by the question. "Of course," she insisted, though her eyes slid away from mine. "We're family." "Family," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "Was that what you were thinking when you and Marcus planned to have me committed? When you spread rumors about my mental stability to prepare the ground for taking over my position?" Her face paled. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I know," I interrupted. "What matters is that I do." Rose slumped in her chair, the fight visibly draining from her. "I need money, Vivian," she admitted baldly. "All my accounts are frozen. My credit cards don't work. I can't even pay my rent." "I'm aware," I replied calmly. "The investigation into the fraud is ongoing. Assets acquired through criminal activity tend to be subject to seizure." "But I'll lose everything," she cried, a fresh tear tracking down her cheek. "My apartment, my car." "The apartment I helped you buy," I clarified. "The car that was a gift from Dad, purchased with company funds? Yes, I imagine you will lose those things." Rose stared at me, shock replacing desperation in her expression. "You're enjoying this," she accused, her voice barely above a whisper. "You want us to suffer." I considered her words carefully before responding. In truth, there was a part of me that did derive satisfaction from their downfall, a dark corner of my soul that thrilled at the justice of it all. But that wasn't all I felt. "What I want," I said finally, "is accountability. You, Marcus, and Dad stole millions from the company. You betrayed my trust in the most personal way possible, and when I began to discover the truth, you planned to declare me mentally unfit rather than face consequences." "It was Marcus's idea," she blurted, grasping at straws. "And Dad's. I just went along with it. I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "Yet you did, repeatedly and deliberately. Tell me, when exactly did you and Marcus begin your affair, before or after he proposed to me?" She had the grace to look ashamed. It just happened, Viv. We didn't plan it." "That wasn't my question," I pressed, leaning forward. "Before or after?" Rose's gaze dropped to her hands, twisting nervously in her lap. "Before," she admitted in a small voice. "But it was just once, and then we tried to stop, but—" "Please," I cut her off, raising a hand. "Spare me the details. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of years of deception hanging heavy between us. Outside my window, clouds drifted across the sun, momentarily dimming the bright office. "What happens now?" Rose finally asked, her voice small and uncertain. "Now," I replied, "you face the consequences of your choices. The legal system will determine the appropriate penalties for fraud. As for your living situation, I suggest downsizing significantly." She stared at me, fresh tears welling in her eyes. "Can't you forgive me? For all we've been through together?" For a brief moment, I allowed myself to remember the sister I'd loved. The girl who'd held my hand on the first day of school, who'd stayed up all night comforting me after my first heartbreak, who'd been my maid of honor at a wedding that never happened. The memories flickered like distant stars, beautiful but impossibly far away. "Forgiveness," I said slowly, "isn't something you can demand. It's something you earn through genuine remorse and changed behavior. So far, all I've heard from you is regret at being caught and concern for your own comfort." Rose stood abruptly, anger replacing desperation. "You've changed, Vivian. You used to have a heart." "Yes," I agreed simply. "I have changed, and you helped change me." As she stormed toward the door, I called after her. "Rose!" She paused, hand on the doorknob, not turning around. "The artwork you borrowed," I said. "I'll need it returned by the end of the week. My insurance company is getting anxious." Her shoulders stiffened, but she said nothing as she yanked open the door and left, the sound of her retreating footsteps echoing down the hallway. I turned back to my window, watching the city below continue its endless rhythm of movement and life. The confrontation had left me feeling hollow rather than triumphant, a reminder that even justified revenge carries its own cost. The following day, Marcus requested a meeting through his lawyer. I agreed, curious to see what approach he would take after Rose's emotional appeal had failed. He arrived precisely on time, dressed in a suit that looked expensive, but not quite as bespoke as his previous wardrobe. The scent of his cologne, once so attractive to me, now made my stomach churn as I watched him settle into the visitor's chair across from my desk. "Thank you for seeing me," he began, his tone professionally detached. "I appreciate your time." "Of course," I replied, equally formal. "What can I do for you, Marcus?" He cleared his throat, straightening his already perfect tie. "I'll be direct. I have information that could be valuable to the ongoing investigation. Details about the structure of the offshore accounts, documentation your team hasn't yet discovered." I leaned back in my chair, studying him with new interest. "You're offering to testify against Robert and Rose?" A flicker of discomfort crossed his face at my use of my father's first name, but he nodded. "In exchange for immunity, yes." "Turning on your future father-in-law and fiancé," I observed. "That's quite a pivot, even for you." His jaw tightened slightly. "It's pragmatic. The evidence against me is circumstantial compared to theirs. With the right deal, I could avoid prison time." I couldn't help but laugh, the sound startling in the quiet office. "You really haven't changed, have you? Still looking out for yourself above all others?" "That's not fair," he protested, but there was no real conviction in his voice. "Isn't it?" I challenged. "You were engaged to me while sleeping with my sister. You helped steal millions from the company that employed you, and now you're willing to betray your co-conspirators to save yourself." He leaned forward, desperation beginning to crack his composed facade. "Vivian, be reasonable. My cooperation could save Lancaster Group millions in investigative costs, not to mention the PR benefits of a quick resolution." "I'm sure the prosecutors will find your offer interesting," I replied, deliberately vague. "But I'm afraid any deals would be their purview, not mine." "You could put in a word," he pressed. "Your influence would carry significant weight." I studied him thoughtfully, taking in the man I'd once planned to marry. In the harsh, fluorescent lighting of my office, I could see the calculation behind his charming smile, the self-interest that drove his every action. "You know what fascinates me, Marcus?" I said conversationally. "You're sitting there, asking for my help, and you haven't once apologized for what you did." He blinked, thrown off script. I assumed that would be understood. Of course I regret being caught," I finished for him, "not the betrayal itself." Marcus squirmed in his seat, his composure cracking further. What do you want from me, Vivian? Public self-flagellation? I'm trying to be practical here. And that's exactly why I won't be helping you, I replied, rising from my chair to indicate our meeting was over. Your practical approach to morality is precisely the problem. You're not sorry you hurt me. You're sorry you lost your position, your status, your comfortable life. That's not true, he insisted, though his eyes wouldn't meet mine. I did care for you, in my way. Your way, I repeated softly. Yes, I suppose you did. I moved toward the door, opening it in a clear dismissal. I'll pass your offer along to the investigators, but I won't be advocating for any special treatment. You made your choices, Marcus. Now you get to live with them. He stood slowly, his expression hardening. You won't get away with this, you know. Robert has connections, contingency plans. I'm counting on it, I replied with a confidence that seemed to unnerve him. Goodbye, Marcus. As he passed me at the door, he paused, lowering his voice. I never thought you had this in you. This ruthlessness. I learned from the best, I told him, meeting his gaze steadily. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run. The door closed behind him with a satisfying click, and I allowed myself a moment of stillness before returning to my desk. The confrontation had left me feeling strangely empty. Vindicated, yes, but without the surge of satisfaction I'd expected. My father was the last to appear, a week after the disastrous dinner party. Unlike Rose and Marcus, he didn't request a meeting or announce his arrival. He simply appeared in my doorway late one evening as I was preparing to leave, his imposing figure silhouetted against the hallway light. Dad, I acknowledged, carefully keeping my tone neutral. This is a surprise. He stepped into my office without invitation, closing the door behind him. In the dim evening light, he looked older than I remembered. The lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped under the weight of his expensive suit. You've redecorated, he observed, glancing around at the changes I'd made to what had once been his domain. The dark woods and hunting prints had been replaced with lighter furnishings and abstract art. Even the seating arrangement had been altered, my desk now positioned to showcase the city view rather than to intimidate visitors. I needed a fresh start, I replied, remaining standing. What can I do for you? He moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the skyline. The ticking of my watch counted down the seconds before he finally spoke. You've won, Vivian, he said, his voice holding none of its usual dominance. The board supports you. The prosecutors have mountains of evidence. Even our lawyers are suggesting plea deals. I said nothing, simply waiting for him to continue. I've lost everything, he went on. My company, my reputation, my freedom soon enough. Your company? I repeated, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Lancaster Group was legally mine for years. You just never thought I'd actually claim it. He turned to face me, something like respect flickering in his eyes. No, I didn't. That was my mistake. The admission surprised me. In my previous life, my father had never acknowledged an error, never conceded a point. Why are you here? I asked directly. If it's about money... It's not about money, he cut me off. It's about family secrets. Things that could damage Lancaster Group if they became public during a trial. My pulse quickened slightly. This was a new move, one that hadn't happened in my previous life. What kind of secrets? The origins of the company, he said, his voice lowering. The early funding, some of our initial clients. I understood the implication immediately. Lancaster Group had been founded in the early 1980s, a time of loose regulations and questionable business practices. I'd never questioned the company's origin story, a tale of entrepreneurial vision and fortunate timing, but I'd always suspected there was more beneath the surface. You're threatening me, I stated, the realization crystallizing. Either I help you avoid prosecution, or you'll expose secrets that could damage the company I've just taken control of. He spread his hands in a gesture that might have seemed conciliatory if not for the calculation in his eyes. I prefer to think of it as mutually assured destruction. We both have something to lose. I moved to the small bar in the corner of my office, the crystal decanter clinking against a glass as I poured myself a measure of whiskey. The rich, smoky scent filled my nostrils as I took a small sip, considering my response. You know what's fascinating? I said finally, turning back to face him. You still think this is a negotiation, that we're making a business deal. His eyebrows drew together in confusion. Isn't that what this is? No, I replied simply. This is me showing you the door. I set down my glass and walked to the office entrance, pulling it open in a clear dismissal. Whatever secrets you think you have, they're 30 years old. Ancient history. The company can weather their revelation far better than it could continue under corrupt leadership. You can't be serious, he said, genuine shock registering on his face. You'd risk everything just to see me punished. Not everything, I corrected him. Just whatever it takes to ensure justice is served. You taught me that, Dad. Always be willing to pay the price for what you truly want. He stood frozen for a long moment, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. You've changed, he said finally, echoing Rose's words from days earlier. Yes, I agreed. I have... As he moved toward the door, defeat evident in every line of his body, I added quietly, for what it's worth, I wish it hadn't come to this. He paused on the threshold, his back to me. Do you? He asked, his voice barely audible. I considered the question honestly. Did I wish things had been different? That my family had loved me enough to treat me with basic decency? I wish you had been the father I deserved, I said finally. The father I thought you were. He nodded once, a short, sharp movement, then walked away without looking back. The sound of his footsteps receded down the hallway, each one more distant than the last. I closed the door and returned to my desk, the victory I'd sought for so long suddenly feeling hollow. In the quiet of my office, surrounded by the trappings of success, I allowed myself to acknowledge what I'd been avoiding. Revenge, however justified, was a poor substitute for the family I'd lost. The final confrontation came 2 weeks later, at the Lancaster Group board meeting where my restructuring plan would be officially ratified. I arrived early, reviewing my presentation one last time as I waited for the other members to arrive. The conference room smelled of fresh coffee and the subtle fragrance of the white lilies I'd had placed in the center of the table, a personal touch to mark the beginning of a new era. The directors filtered in gradually, exchanging subdued greetings. Many still seemed uncomfortable with the dramatic power shift and ongoing scandal, though none had opposed my leadership openly. I'd spent the intervening weeks shoring up support, demonstrating my vision and competence, proving I was more than capable of steering the company through this crisis. At precisely 9 a.m., as I prepared to call the meeting to order, the door opened once more. My father entered, flanked by Rose and Marcus, all three accompanied by stern-faced lawyers clutching leather portfolios. The conversation died immediately, all eyes turning to the unexpected arrivals. Robert, I acknowledged coolly, using his first name rather than Dad in this professional setting. This is a surprise. I wasn't aware you were still on the board invitation list. As the founder of this company, he replied, his voice carrying the authority that had once made executives and politicians alike defer to him, I believe I have a right to address the board regarding its future. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, uncertain how to respond to this confrontation. I don't believe you do, I countered calmly, not since you resigned your position following the fraud allegations. Allegations that remain unproven in court, one of the lawyers interjected smoothly. My clients are here to propose a resolution that would benefit all parties and preserve Lancaster Group's reputation. I studied the three people who had once been my family, now united against me. Rose looked uncomfortable but determined, her gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder. Marcus maintained his professional mask, though I could see the calculation behind his pleasant expression. My father stood straight-backed and resolute, every inch the business titan he'd once been. The board has already reviewed and rejected your previous settlement offers, I reminded them. Nothing has changed since then. Actually, my father said, something has. He nodded to one of the lawyers who stepped forward to distribute bound presentations to each board member. What's this? Asked Gerald Winters, our longest-serving director, leafing through the document with a frown. Evidence, my father declared, that the current leadership of Lancaster Group, specifically my daughter, has engaged in market manipulation, insider trading, and corporate espionage over the past month. A murmur of shock rippled through the room. I remained perfectly still, betraying no reaction as I accepted my copy of the presentation. "That's a serious accusation," I observed, my voice steady. "With serious evidence to support it," Marcus added, speaking for the first time, "particularly regarding certain investment decisions that showed unusual foresight." He was referring, I realized, to the investments I'd made using my financial vision, the uncanny ability to predict market movements that had manifested after my rebirth. Of course, they would seem suspicious to outside observers. They had been perfect in their timing, impossible to explain through conventional analysis. I set the document aside without opening it. Is there a point to this theatrical display? My father stepped forward, placing his hands on the back of an empty chair. "Our proposal is simple. The board reinstates me as CEO with Marcus as CFO. In exchange, these findings remain private, sparing Lancaster Group a second scandal that would certainly destroy its remaining value." "And what about the fraud charges?" I asked, genuinely curious about their endgame. "A misunderstanding," Rose spoke up, her voice tentative but gaining strength. "The result of administrative errors that could be corrected without criminal proceedings." I looked around the table, taking in the expressions of the board members. Most seemed troubled, a few angry, but none appeared convinced by my family's desperate gambit. "I see," I said finally, rising to my feet. The subtle power move drew all eyes to me, standing while they remained seated. "You're asking this board to reinstate leadership that has already admitted to financial misconduct based on unsubstantiated accusations against the person who exposed that misconduct." "The accusations are substantiated," one of the lawyers insisted, tapping the presentation. "The trading patterns are perfectly legal and explainable," I interrupted, "as our compliance department has already confirmed." This was, strictly speaking, true. I'd been careful to document conventional rationales for each decision, creating paper trails that would withstand scrutiny even if the true source of my insights remained my secret. I reached for the remote control on the table, activating the large screen at the front of the room. "In fact, I anticipated this move, gentlemen. And ladies," I added with a nod to Rose and the female board members, "which is why I prepared this." The screen displayed a comprehensive analysis of Lancaster Group's financial health before and after I'd taken control, a stark contrast that showed the company's rapid recovery under my leadership. Charts and graphs illustrated increased stability, renewed investor confidence, and projected growth that far outpaced industry standards. "In 4 weeks," I continued, advancing through my presentation, "we've stabilized our stock price, reassured major clients, and secured new international partnerships that will ensure Lancaster Group's future for generations to come." I clicked to the final slide, a simple statement of our core values with integrity listed first. "We're building something new here, something better, and we're doing it the right way." I set down the remote and faced my family and their lawyers directly. "So, no, I will not be stepping aside, and yes, the fraud investigation will continue to its natural conclusion." My father's face had darkened with anger, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple. "You're making a mistake," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. "No," I replied simply. "I'm correcting one." I turned to the head of security, who had been standing discreetly by the door throughout the exchange. "Please escort our visitors out. They no longer have authorization to be in this building." "You can't do this," Rose protested, her voice rising. "We built this company." "And then you nearly destroyed it," I reminded her. "But that ends today." The security team moved forward, professional and calm as they surrounded my family and their legal team. For a moment, I thought my father might physically resist. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his jaw tight with suppressed rage. But then, abruptly, the fight seemed to drain from him. His shoulders slumped, his expression shifting from anger to something that might have been respect, or perhaps simple resignation. "You win," he said quietly as the security guards approached. "Completely." It was the last thing he said to me before being escorted from the room, Rose and Marcus following in stunned silence. The sound of the door closing behind them echoed with finality. I turned back to the board, aware of their evaluating gazes. "Well," I said with a small smile, "shall we continue with today's agenda?" The tension in the room gradually dissipated as we moved through the business at hand, my restructuring plan receiving unanimous approval by the meeting's end. As the directors filed out, several paused to offer quiet words of support or congratulations. Left alone in the conference room, I stood at the window overlooking the city, watching the patterns of traffic and pedestrians far below. The confrontation had gone exactly as I'd planned. My family's desperate move anticipated and countered before they'd even conceived it. Yet the victory felt different than I'd imagined. There was satisfaction, certainly. Justice had been served, my position secured. But the rage that had driven me since my rebirth had dimmed, replaced by something quieter and more contemplative. I had won, completely, as my father had acknowledged. The question now was what to do with that victory.